In this video, we will show you how to replace your rear brakes, pads and rotors on this Kia Forte Koup. This will be located behind your rear wheels. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we need to do is safely raise and support the rear of the vehicle so the wheels are off the ground. Once you've completed that, the next thing you need to do is remove all 5 of your 21mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Now that we have the wheel off, we have a clear view of the brakes. To start disassembling the brakes, we're going to make our way to the caliper. We have to depress the caliper piston, which is located in this area. This can be done in a couple different ways. We'll do this by using a pry bar right inside this area, prying up against the brake pad, and we'll gently start pulling this outward. Once you have movement from there, we'll continue on with our 2 caliper slider mounting bolts. To remove these, we'll be using a 14mm. Start with the top one there. Just go ahead and loosen it up. Leave it in there a couple threads. Once you have the caliper off there, the next thing that you need to pay attention to is the caliper piston and the protective boot. If you see any fluid making its way out of this area, it's brake fluid and you have to replace the caliper. This one looks fine. We'll set it aside. Now it's time to remove our brake pads. Continue with your 14mm. We're going to remove the 2 caliper bracket mounting bolts. Same process. Remove the upper, quick inspection, start it back in, just a couple threads. The next thing we'll have to do to be able to remove the brake rotor is look for this Phillips head screw. You can see it right here next to the lug stud. To remove this, typically you're going to have a bit driver. With that bit driver, we're going to apply counterclockwise pressure and tap on it with a hammer. Continuing from here, we'll be using that hammer, and we need to tap on the brake rotor, separating it from the wheel bearing located behind it. Now that we have the rotor off of there, the next thing that you need to do is pay close attention to your parking brake shoes, which are located behind that brake rotor. If it looks like they're worn or damaged or need to be replaced, now's the time to do it. Before we can install our brake rotor, we need to make sure we clean our wheel bearing hub. That's this area right here, and it's the mating surface for our rotor to sit on. To do this, you can use a wire brush or even some sandpaper if necessary. Once you've cleaned and inspected the area, go ahead and apply some anti-seize. I don't need very much here. Now it's time to install our brake rotor. Let's install our mounting screw here. Once you've completed that, the next thing you need to do is install a rubber plug in this area, assuming you have one. Let's start disassembling our caliper bracket so we can clean and lubricate. We'll start along each side. You should have caliper bracket tins. We'll just pop those right out of place. There we are. Now continuing from there, we're going to remove each of our 2 caliper slider pins. To remove those, typically you want to take hold of the boot itself and the pin and carefully slide the pin out and away from the caliper bracket and the boot. Once you have that off of there, you want to clean and inspect that as well. To do that, we can just use a clean rag, give it a quick wipe. The areas on the slider pin you need to pay attention to would be this smooth shafted area here. Of course, we want to make sure there's nothing on there that can restrict this from moving as it should. And then also up closest to my thumb here, there's a small groove, and that's where the boot will sit. If it looks like there's any miscellaneous debris in there, go ahead and use a wire wheel or a wire brush and clean it up. That one looks pretty good. Do the same to the other one. Something to note when cleaning and lubricating these, there are 2 different caliper slider pins. What you can see on the one I have in my hand is down closest to my thumb here, we have a vibration dampener. We want to ensure that this is still in good working order as well, not swollen or damaged in any way. So we'll pay attention to that, the shafted area, and all the way up at that point right there, closest to my fingers. As I mentioned, we want to remember exactly where each one of these goes so we can reinstall them in the proper positioning. We'll set those aside. Continuing from there, we'll be removing the caliper slider boots from the bracket. For this, you should be able to take hold of the boot, squeeze it, and slide it right out of place. Once you have it dislodged, the next thing you need to do is clean and inspect it. We want to make sure it's soft and pliable, not torn, worn, or damaged. To clean these boots, you can use a rag, twist it, and bring it straight on through the center. Pull it through the far end there. Now once you have it through there, the next thing we'll do is continue on with rubbing the boot like this in a circular manner. That's going to remove as much of the debris and grease from the inside of the boot as possible. One last inspection here. We'll set that one aside. Same process for the other caliper slider mounting boot. Continuing from here, we'll have to use some parts cleaner inside of each of the ports where those caliper slider pins will go. Something to keep in mind is you want to have a collection receptacle so you can recycle the fluid properly. Other than that, typically when you're using a parts cleaner spraying in, some of it will want to spray out. So make sure you're careful that it does not spray on your face. Give these a quick rinse. With each of those 2 ports cleaned out, the next thing we need to do is clean the mounting points where those caliper bracket tins were sitting. To do this, you can use a wire brush or even some sandpaper if necessary. At this point, we have all of the caliper bracket cleaned up. We can continue on with the reinstallation process. For the installation process, we'll use some high temperature caliper lubricant inside of each one of the 2 caliper slider ports. Continuing from there, we need to reinstall our 2 caliper slider boots. Those just pretty much press right in there, give them a little twist, make sure they are properly secured. Continuing from there, it's time for our caliper slider pins. You want to lubricate the entire smooth shafted area all the way down to the tip and up inside the groove closest to my fingers. We'll slide that in. Squeeze out any air from inside the boot here. Continue on the same process for the other caliper slider pin. Once again, we're paying attention to the vibration dampener that's on one of the slider pins. It needs to go back in the very same port as where you had removed it. Spin. We've got our tins. We'll use some more of that high temperature caliper lubricant along those areas that we had cleaned up where the tins will sit. Now it's time to install those caliper bracket tins. We'll just slide them right on there. Typically for these, when you install them, you should feel them click into the proper position. Once you've done so, just give them a little wiggle and make sure they're properly secured. Let's get this over to the vehicle. get the caliper bracket on the vehicle. Now for those two caliper bracket mounting bolts, you're going to find that one's a little bit longer than the other. The longer bolt will go up along the top. We'll start that in by hand. Down along the bottom, we're using the shorter mounting bolt. Once again, starting it in by hand. Once they're both started, you can bottom them out. We'll torque these to 50 foot-pounds. Now it's time to install our brake pads. When installing brake pads, you want to make sure you have your inboard pad with the wear indicator, and that wear indicator needs to be facing up. We'll slide that brake pad into position here, pressing it up against the brake rotor. Once you do have it in position, go ahead and give it a little wiggle. We want to make sure that you can move it around easily and it's not stuck in place. If you have to use a hammer to drive it in there, you didn't clean the bracket well enough. Outer pad, no wear indicator. Let's get that on there. Same process, slide it in, make sure it can move around. Now let's pay attention to the caliper. Once again, we're using our high temperature caliper lubricant. This time we're going along the piston area and along the backside of each of these two ears. Essentially on the areas that are hitting up against your brake pads. This will help with vibration dampening and noise reduction overall. With that lubricated, we'll slide it right on over the brake pads and caliper bracket. Continue on with your two caliper slider mounting bolts. Snug each of these and torque them to 20 foot-pounds. One last quick inspection in this area and it's time to reinstall our wheel. Start on all 5 of your 21mm lug nuts. We'll bottom them out and get the wheel safely back down on the ground. With the wheel back on the ground, we'll be torquing each one of our lug nuts in a crisscross manner to 80 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay friend, we've completed one side of the rear brakes on your vehicle. The process for one side is the exact same thing as the other. Once you completed that, go ahead and pump up the brake pedal till it's nice and firm. Take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.